Hello and welcome. Financial planning is starting at 6 o'clock. So welcome in. We have a few participants coming in. Um, I recognize a few names here too. Thanks for joining tonight. I think this one is going to be great. We've actually never done this session before. It was a suggestion of one of our career committee members, this financial planning session tonight. And he reached out to some really excellent alumni contacts that he has. And they both work in this industry and they've decided to put together this presentation for you. And I'm glad that you're joining. There's a lot of useful information. So this is the financial planning webinar, and we are going to start at 6 o'clock, but we're just getting a few people in. We're getting some good numbers of people coming in. If anyone at all wants to type in the chat box, you can actually click on that. It's in your little toolbar. It says chat with the speech bubble, and you can click it to everyone and you can say hi. And maybe if you're joining from a city other than Edmonton, if you'd like to type your city in, that would be really interesting. Also, if you're graduating this year, that'd be pretty fun to see too, the class of 2023. If you want to type that in the chat, that'd be great. Lots of highs coming in. Yeah. Good evening. Thanks for coming, everyone. Yeah, we're getting some good numbers coming in. And we have our panelists, Kevin and Mandeep, watching from the sidelines, seeing the chats come in too. So they're just waiting off to the side right now until we get started and I do some introductions. So welcome everyone. You're at the financial planning webinar. Start at 6 o'clock. We're just letting a few people in right now. I know it's 6:01, but I see the numbers slowly creeping up. I'm just going to give it one more second, and then I'll get started and all this this extra stuff, this business at the beginning. And if there are others joining, then hopefully they can kind of figure it out as we go. So yeah, we're pretty good numbers, slowly creeping up there. Welcome everyone. It's so great to be here for this webinar. We've never done this before for Life After University. It was the idea of one of our career committee members, and I'm so glad. I hope you find it really useful. My name is Jennifer Jenkins, and I take care of all the career programming for the U of A's Alumni Association. And this is the second event for the Life After University conference. We have 7 events this week. And I'd like you to consider coming to some of the other sessions during the week. If you attend 4 of the sessions, we'll be sending you a micro-credential badge at the beginning of July. This is administered by the registrar's office at the U of A. And what it is it lives with your transcript, and you can use it for things like LinkedIn and your resume, and just as proof that you've done some career development training. If you're a grad student, any of the sessions you attend will be eligible for hours towards your professional development hour requirement. And we'll be sending out an email after the event with a survey on the event, giving some feedback to the speakers. But for those grad students, U of A grad students, there'll be a little area there for you to fill out so you can secure that, and we'll forward it off to FGSR right away. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the University of Alberta is located on Treaty 6 territory, and we respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. There are about 300,000 people who've graduated from the University of Alberta all around the world. And you'll find that wherever you end up after graduation, there are alumni there that want to help. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. We'll be taking questions throughout the presentation, and we'll answer as many of them as possible at the end. You can type your questions at any time into the Q&A feature. That's the little two speech bubbles at the bottom of the screen there in your bar there. The session will be recorded today and accessible until June 30th on the on-demand page. Zoom now offers closed captioning. If you'd like to use this feature, please click the CC button on your toolbar. If you'd like to turn off this feature, press More, that's the ... and select Hide Subtitles. Okay, now I'll introduce you to our speakers. Kevin is a wealth advisor and a senior investment associate with BMO Nesbitt Burns. He's been in the financial services industry for over 12 years. He has a strong passion in financial planning and investment management. Kevin delivers tailored wealth advice and customized financial plans to his clients. He completed his Master's of Administration and Bachelor of Commerce with honors from the University of Alberta. He holds several well-recognized professional credentials, including the Chartered Investment Manager, Certified Financial Planner, and Fellow of the Canadian Securities Institute. And also I'd like to introduce Mandeep. Mandeep works as a senior financial advisor with ATB Wealth. He's been with ATB Wealth for more than 5 years and over 7 years in total in the financial services industry. He truly enjoys helping Albertans achieve their most cherished financial goals through holistic financial planning and behavioral coaching, as he believes that investor behavior is the single most important factor in achieving strong investment returns over time. His passion for continuous learning brought him to Edmonton in 2014 to pursue an MBA from the University of Alberta, and he is a proud U of A alumni graduating in 2016. He's also a certified financial planner, which gives him the expertise to assist clients with all their financial needs, not just with their investments. I'd like to introduce you to Kevin and Mandeep. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Jen. Thank you for the warm introduction. And good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Lai. So joining me today is Mandeep Narula. We both are financial advisors. Like Jen said, we both graduated from the U of A. So for myself, I did my undergrad in 2011, and I came back for the MBA 8 years later. I've been working for a dozen years now, but I still remember the fond memories I have from the university days. So to everyone who has just graduated or graduating, big congratulations to all of you. It is such a huge milestone, and from the bottom of my heart, I wish you all the best, a successful and happy career and life ahead of you. So today we want to start off by giving a special thanks to the University of Alberta for giving us the chance to speak with you. The topic today will be around financial planning and investing. For some of you, you might think that is one of the most boring subjects out there. So thank you for signing in and listening to us. Grab a coffee, grab snacks, grab supper, and stay with us for the next hour, because I can assure you that financial literacy is something that wasn't taught enough in school. When I went through school, I did my BCom, I did my MBA, but there's not a whole lot about financial literacy, about financial planning, what's an RSP, what's a TFSA. So, and Mandeep and I, we had to learn this through our career, through hearing the life lessons from our clients, and also through all the mistakes we made along the way. So we're not here to give specific financial advice, because that's based on your personal circumstances, but we want to share our experience with you, and we hope that you pick up a new skill or two. So for some of you, this might be brand new information. For some of you, it might be a refresh. But either way, we can assure you that the things you learn about financial planning and investing, that's going to be a huge asset that's going to benefit you in the years to come. So let's get started. Next slide, please, Jen. Perfect. So here you can see that there's a wide variety of topics that we're going to cover today. So for myself, I'll cover the first portion. You'll see the different types of investment vehicles. We'll talk about some of the familiar names like RSPs, TFSAs, some of the newer names like First Home Savings Account. We'll talk about the importance of budgeting, and in this environment where you should be paying down your debt versus investing. And then in the second section, Mandeep's going to talk a little bit more about investing, about stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and different type of investing styles. And also we'll wrap it up with what's the benefit of hiring a financial advisor versus doing it yourself. And we'll recap it with the importance of financial planning. Next slide. Okay, so the first topic might be the most familiar that for everyone here. So RSP, we may have heard this a lot. You may have already have an RSP account set up. As the name suggests, is the Registered Retirement Savings Plan. So what is an RSP? The RSP is an investment vehicle for you to contribute every year in order to build long-term savings. And the goal of it, of course, is to use in retirement. The RSP contribution room is a percentage of your salary, and then it's calculated up to an annual maximum. So, for example, let's say if your salary is $50,000, the RSP contribution room is 18% of your salary, and that is 18% of 50,000, so that's 9,000, up to an annual maximum of 30,780 as of 2023. So so back to the example of 50,000 salary, 9,000 contribution room. You can contribute the entire 9,000 as into your RSP, or you can contribute a portion of it, or not contribute at all. So any of the unused room that will be used to carry forward to future years. And a lot of you might ask, what's the benefit of buying an RSP? And of course, it's because it's tax deductible. But remember, it's tax deductible right now. It's actually a tax deferral plan. Doesn't mean it's tax-free. And we'll explore that a little bit later on. And the type of investments you can put into an RSP. So think about RSP as an umbrella. So within the RSP, there's a lot of things you can do. You can buy stocks, you can buy bonds, you can buy ETFs, you can buy mutual funds, you can leave it in a savings account, or you can buy a GIC. So the money will continue to grow tax-free inside the RSP until you withdraw it later, ideally in your retirement age. When you draw it out, the withdrawal will be subject to income tax. So that's why that I say it's not tax-free. It's merely that you don't pay tax today, but later on, when you withdraw in the future in your retirement, the goal is you'll have lesser income in your retirement, and then when you take it out, you'll be paying less tax because at a lower tax bracket. But at the same time, there's also other ways to use RSPs. You can use it for home purchases, and you can use it for educational purposes. So we'll explore that together as well. Next slide. Okay, so here we're going to walk through an example of an RSP contribution. On the right-hand side, you'll see what we call the combined federal and the provincial tax rate for 2023. So I put up the Alberta one, and as we all know, in Canada, the higher income we make, the more tax we pay, and that's based on the tax bracket system. So on the left-hand side, you see that the different tax brackets here, and then on the right-hand side, the rate on access, the 0, 15, 25, that is in accordance to your income. So let's say, walk through a few numbers here. The first 15,000, let's say you were to make less than 15,000, you basically don't have to pay tax. Anything in above of 15,000 and 21,000, then that amount will be taxed at 15%, 253, that will be at 25%, and so on. So the higher income you make, the more tax you pay. Easy concept to explain, but at the same time, that's when tax planning comes into play. That's when you want to look into, okay, should I be buying RSP to cut down on some of my taxes payable today? So here we're going to walk through an example together. So in this example, the idea is to buy 5,000 RSP, to make a 5,000 contribution into your RSP, but there's two different scenarios. In the first scenarios is, let's say you have just graduated from university, you start your first job, and let's say you make 50,000 income. So at 50,000 income, your marginal tax bracket is at 25%. So a lot of you will think that, okay, if I make 50,000, I buy 5,000 RSP, how much tax savings do I have? The tax savings calculated at 5,000, the amount you buy, times it by 25%, and that's 1,250. Now, in the other scenario, let's say this person is a higher income earner, making 120,000. Now, the margin bracket in Alberta is not 25%, it's 36%. So the tax savings you're going to realize is going to be quite a bit bigger. So 5,000 times by 36%, that's 1,800. So as you can see that with the same 5,000 contribution, making an RSP contribution at 36% when you're making higher income versus at 25%, that would actually generate you an extra 550 in tax savings. So the reason why I put this example here is to illustrate that the importance of buying RSP is good, but also it's a strategy. Yeah, it's for tax planning. You don't just buy just because, oh no, I see that I have this much RSP contribution room. Should I be maxing it out if I have the extra cash? Depends, right? Because let's say in the first scenario, you're making $50,000 income today, you will not buy the entire. You get 18% as your RSP limit. You want to buy the entire 9,000. So you put in the 9,000 today, and then instead of 50,000, you'll only be paying tax on 41,000 because the 50,000 minus 9,000 that will become your income tax payable. However, let's say many years down the road, when you retire, you're going to collect different income sources, right? You have your CPP, your Canada Pension Plan. After 65, you start collecting OH securities, the OAS, and you may have a pension from work. You will be building up your RSP, you have other savings. And at that time, let's say in your retirement age, if your income maybe at that time is 70,000. So think about it, if you buy RSP today at 50,000, but later on, when you take the money out at 70,000, you actually be paying more tax down the road. So in that case, it might not make the most sense to buy RSP today. You might want to save that RSP contribution room until future years when you make a higher income. Next slide. So here, we're going to talk about something that's might be familiar to a lot of you, is the tax-free savings account. So RSP walked through the example that it's a tax deferral, it's not tax-free. Now, with the TFSA, the tax-free savings account is truly tax-free. So a lot of you may be familiar with the program. It's a program started by the government in 2009. And the whole concept is they want to encourage Canadians to save more, right? So when it started, the program, it allowed you a $5,000 TFSA contribution limit, and then over the years have increased. So today, in 2023, the TFSA contribution limit is $6,500. So what it does is it allows you to save and grow your money tax-free. Now, the contribution room accumulates after you reach the age of majority, and in Alberta, that's age of 18. And similar to RSP, the unused room that you have can be carried forward to future years. So if you couldn't maximize your TFSA today, that's okay. You can save the room until future years, and then you can max it out. In terms of types of investment, similar to RSP, stocks, bonds, ETFs, mutual funds, GICs, and so on. So once again, even though the name is a tax-free savings account, doesn't mean it's just merely a savings account. It's a vehicle, and there's many things you can do inside it. And of course, the goal of it is to grow the money to as large as you want, as you can, because whatever you earn inside is truly tax-free, right? And then withdrawals can be tax-free, and it can be made anytime. So it doesn't matter if you take it out for a car purchase, for a down payment towards a house, going on vacation, any reasons, the government doesn't care. You can take the money out and you don't have to pay tax on it. It doesn't affect your other benefits. It doesn't affect your pension. So that's why as financial advisors, we always suggest our clients that, hey, if you have extra cash, put it into your TFSA rehab. And lastly, the amount withdrawn can actually be recontributed in the following year. And we're going to explore that as with an example in the next slide. Next slide, Jen. Okay, so here we're going to walk through an example of a TFSA withdrawal and a recontribution. So for this person, John, his TFSA room was 36,000. He had maximized it. The amount has grown over years, and now it's 45,000. So when John takes it out today, it's completely tax-free. He can put it towards the down payment for his house, but the only catch is within this year, he cannot put the money back. So the entire 45,000, he can use it for the house purchase is tax-free, but he has to wait until next year, January 1st, 2024. Then he can actually contribute the entire amount he withdraw, and put it back to his TFSA. So he can put back the entire 45 that money he took out, not the 360 contributed. So now effectively his room actually increased to 45,000. Plus, of course, the 2024 TFSA room as well. Now let's assume that's 6,500 back to his TFSA account. So here it's a good example to see that TFSA is very useful in the sense that whatever you put inside is tax-free. You can take the money out. Hopefully, it grows to a bigger pot, and then when you take it or use it, let's say if you're extra saving, you build it back up again, and that funds will continue to grow tax-free. Next slide. Next slide, Jen. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So this one is a newer one that actually just got introduced by the Fed this year for 2023. So some of you may have heard of it. It's called a First Home Savings Account, abbreviated to FHSA. So what it is we always call it a hybrid between an RSP and TFSA. So the whole point of this account is to encourage people to save towards their first home purchase. As for Alberta, it wasn't too bad, but let's say for some of the other cities like in BC or Ontario, the housing prices have skyrocketed, right? So then how did the government encourage the people to save more, towards the down purchase and lower the tax? Is to introduce this one so that the first-time home buyers they can contribute $8,000 a year, and then the lifetime maximum is $40,000. And when you contribute that money in, let's say you put the entire $8,000 in, the contribution is tax deductible. So much like an RSP, you actually get a receipt. It'll lower your taxable income. And then when you withdraw it, and remember it has to be for your first home purchase, then your withdrawal is tax-free, much like a TFSA. That's why we call it hybrid. And then with this plan, it actually can be combined together with your TFSA account and your RSP home buyers plan, which we're going to explore in the next slide, towards your home purchase. So, and a lot of you might ask, okay, so what if I start this account, I've been investing it's been growing, but I have not found a home, or I decided not to buy a home. So the catch is, if you were to withdraw the funds, not use it for home purchase, you have up until 15 years since you put money in to find your home. But let's say if you decided to draw the money out not for home purchase, then the funds can actually be transferred into an RSP, given that you have RSP contribution rule. If you don't, if you needed the money, then it will be taxed, much like an RSP. So let's say you have 50,000 inside the first home savings account that you have built up. You needed to cash the account out, that 50,000 will be added to your income tax. So that's why the FHSA is good, as long as you have the goal and the plan to buy a house for your home purchase. Next slide, Jen. Okay, so this one is the first-time home buyers plan. It's related to the RSP. So some of you may have heard of this one. What it is it's been a plan that's been around for a while. It's for the amount that you've been building inside your RSP. And then as we talked about a couple of slides ago, for RSP is ideally you want to use the money for retirement, because if you were to take the money out early, you have to pay tax on it, right? Together with your other employment income and so on, it'll push up your income tax bracket quite a bit. But however, let's say if you were to use the money from your RSP towards your home purchase, then that withdrawal, you don't have to pay tax right away. So the withdrawal limit is $35,000 a person, and let's say for a couple, it's $70,000 combined. So when you take the money out, so think about it this way: is you can borrow money from your RSP, right? So let's say you've been buying RSP over the next few years, and then now that you see a home that you want to buy, so you can actually take the money out from your RSP. There's no tax implication right now, but in the next 15 years, you have to actually put the money back into your RSP. So it's much like taking a loan from your RSP, no tax implication today, you use it to buy your home, but within the next 15 years, you're going to pay it back. So the calculation is, let's say you take the $35,000 out, the annual minimum repayment requirement is $35,000 divided by 15 years. So in this case, it's about $2,300 a year. So meaning that at a minimum, you have to put back $2,300 into your RSP. You cannot put less, but you can put more. So for instance, let's say if you have $5,000 you want to put towards your RSP after you've taken out from your home buyer's plan. So the minimum requirement is only $2,300. So you can allocate that $2,300 towards your home buyer's plan repayment, and then the remaining $2,700 you can allocate it towards an RSP contribution. It can be a combination of both. So in this case, that you will satisfy the repayment requirement for the annual minimum, and also you get a tax receipt for $2,700 to lower your income tax. And so, once again, that's the minimum amount you need to put back. You can, if you have the cash flow, you can actually repay this $35,000 back earlier, but you have up to 15 years to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we've talked about a few plans, RSPs, TFSAs, first home savings account, and home buyer's plan. So a lot of you might ask, so what is the right one? What's right for you, right? And the answer is that truly depends. It really depends on your circumstances. It depends on your plan. We kind of talked about it. If your plan is, let's say, if you're working out, if your plan is to save it up and then to buy a house in a few years, right? If that's the case, you might want to look into the first home savings account. And let's say if you're at a higher income tax bracket today, maybe you're right off the bat, you're making 70, 80 or more a year, then you might want to look into the RSP. So that way that you get a deduction as well for buying the RSP. First home savings account is good, but it's only for the purpose of buying a home. Versus RSP, let's say if you don't use the home buyer's plan, the money will still keep on going, and then later on for your retirement. But let's say if you have no immediate plan to buy a house, or you're unsure what to do, open up a TFSA, right? Because TFSA is truly tax-free. You put the money in, later on you can take the money out. You don't have to pay tax on it. But just be mindful of the TFSA contribution rules. Don't treat it as a checking account. What I mean by that is, don't put money in today, take it out tomorrow, put in a week later, take it out again. Because every time you do that, the government, every time you put money in, it counts towards your contribution group. And once you over-contribute to the, TFSA too much, then you might actually get penalized. And the penalty is 1% a month for every dollar you over-contributed. So, okay, so now we have a quick question from an attendee that, do we need to open the home buyer's plan inside the RSP, or is it on merely open or giving us the option? Great question. The home buyer's plan is something that's given inside the RSP. You don't have to open one separately. So basically, home buyer's plan is an option within the RSP that you could take advantage of. You don't have to use it if it's not for home buyer's plan purposes. So essentially, let's say if you were to go to your financial institution, you just go in and open up an RSP, you make your contributions, you get your tax deductions, and then let's say a few years later, you decided that, okay, I want to draw the money to buy your home. Then you're going to go to your banker, you're going to go to your financial advisor saying, hey, I want to draw, let's say $10,000 out from my RSP account for home buyer's plan purposes. Now, then that person will have to fill out a government form, the home buyer's plan form. So that way that the $10,000 withdrawn doesn't get taxed immediately, because otherwise the $10,000 will be added to your income and you're going to pay tax on it right away. But if it's for home buyer's plan purposes, then it doesn't have to get taxed. You'll get the entire $10,000 and you can use it towards a down payment. But great question. You don't have to set one up specifically just for home buyer's plan purposes. It will just be lumped in within the RSP. Okay, so hopefully I answered that. Next question, please. The next slide. Okay, so here is basically a recap. So I found this image online, and this is a recap between the TFSA, RSP, and home savings account. So essentially, it's almost like a concept sheet of what's right for you and some of the features inside. Like for instance, the tax-free account, where your withdrawal is tax-free. RSP is tax deductible, but not tax deductible is tax deferred until future withdrawals, but not tax-free. Versus home buyer's plan, it is tax deductible when you make the contribution. It's tax-free, but only when you buy your home, right? So make sure that you know what your plan is going in to open up these accounts. Next slide. Okay, so Now we've talked quite a bit about the different types of accounts. We're going to pivot a little bit and talk about budgeting. And budgeting is something that's important, that doesn't matter any stage of life you're in, it is important to have a budget, because having a budget is like having a plan, right? It's essentially you can manage your spending and you manage your savings. So a lot of people would have different ideas of budgeting. You know, some people like to put everything inside their credit card, or let's say maybe you keep it all within your checking account and you can spend however much you have without going over, right? So there's no one set fits it all, but then here's a concept for you to reference to, and we call it the 50-30-20 rule. So what it is that if you were to categorize your spending or your expenses into 3 categories, 50% of it is essentials, or what we call the needs, right? So let's say your fixed expenses, your housing, whether it's a mortgage or rent, your groceries, your food, your medical expenses, right? Your utilities, your cell phone bills. So these are the essentials that you're paying every month, regardless of, basically what happens. Now, the next 30% is flexible, or we call it your wants, right? It's the discretionary spend. So the 30% will be, if you go for shopping, if you were to go out for a vacation, eating out versus, let's say if you were to order in Uber Eats, skip your dishes, streaming services, right? So those would be your spending accounts, or your wants. Now the 20% that stands for your savings. So whether it's savings towards a specific goal, let's say you're saving towards a vacation, towards your specific education you want to pursue, or saving towards your retirement. So 50-30-20, I find that it's a pretty good general rule for you to abide to. And this percentage is not set in stone. It's basically just a guideline, right? So maybe it could be 60-20-20, or it could be 60-35-5, right? When you first start your career, you might not be able to allocate as much to savings, but over time, you wanted to get closer to the 50-30-20 rule. And on this napkin, on the bottom, you'll see an interesting side here. It is, I'm sure that this napkin is probably about 10 years old, because you'll see that Starbucks cup down there. It says it's $3 a day. If you were to get a latte from Starbucks every day, that's going to cost you close to $1,100 a year. And now we all know that if we go to Starbucks, a latte will cost you, let's call it for at least $5, $5.50, right? For a tall grande. And depending on your milk substitution, it will go up to $6 or even $7. So if it's $6 or $7 a latte, that's $2,000 a year, right? And don't get me wrong, I love Starbucks. I'm not here to boycott them, but this just puts it in perspective, right? Like, you have to think about it. Let's say if you were to go get a coffee a day, simple as that, but the cost adds up, right? And would you pivot to maybe to an alternative drink that's slightly more affordable, or maybe you start making a coffee at home, or maybe limit it down to once a week versus once a day. I mean, that's all up to you, but it's important for us to put it into perspective, right? So and the reason why we do budgeting is we see where your money's going, and then that way, that when you visualize it, then you can see that, okay, now I know that, on a yearly basis, I didn't know that I spent $1,000 or $1,500 on coffee alone, right? So it might be shocking to a lot of people, right? When I do it for my clients, a lot of clients say, wow, I spent $5,000 on wine a year, right? And then sometimes it lead into an argument between the spouse, but that's a fun story aside. But at least that way, that you'll be more aware of your spending, right? And from knowing where you're spending your money, then you know where you should spend versus where you should cut back, and that's when you start up your savings habit. Next slide, please. Okay. So here is what we call 5 simple steps to create a budget. So a lot of you may have a budget. A budget doesn't have to be extensive, right? A budget is basically to understand your income, know what your income source is, and once you know your income, list your expenses. And when you list your expenses, I like to categorize it as fixed expenses versus the variable expenses. And then when you know your income, how much you're getting a month, how much you're spending a month, then you can see how much extras you have. And then from there, you can save your money, set your financial goals, and then you can track it, you can monitor it, and you can make adjustments. And some people may ask me, like, how often should I review my budget? And generally, I advise my clients to review it every few months, right? Or as needed, if there's any circumstances change. Let's say if you get a raise at work, or if you were to incur a new expense, or you buy a home or move to a new place, right? Then review it. But don't look at it on a weekly basis, or don't record every single receipt that you spend, because that'll just drive you crazy, right? Yeah. So I will take a quick look at the question and answers, because I see a few questions coming in, and then we'll take a look at that before we move on. Okay, so the first question here is, the benefit of putting money into a TFSA is a regular bank account tax-free. We take the money out, we don't pay the extra tax. Not necessarily. So the tax-free savings account, once again, the name is misleading, right? Because the tax-free savings account, we might think that it's a savings account, right? But it's truly just a thing about as an umbrella. It's an investment vehicle, and there's many things you can do inside. You can put your money in interest regular savings, just leaving your bank account. You might get a minimal interest. You can invest the money inside the TFSA. You can buy GIC inside the TFSA, and doesn't matter what you do. The growth inside is tax-free, you don't have to pay tax on. And then when you take the money out, you don't have to pay tax on it either. So, and the other question is, can you transfer a first home savings account into a TFSA? The short answer is no. I mean, there's no official answer from the government yet, because there is still a brand new account that's just launching this year. But so far, from what I understand, is no, because there's two different types. FHSA can be transferred into an RRSP if you don't use the money for home purchases, and given you have the RSP route, but it cannot be transferred into a TFSA. So the other question is, if you have any, would you know if any banks have already started FHSA? It seems that at least TD have not started yet. Well, great question. I work for BMO, and I can tell you that BMO is starting it in June. So I cannot speak for the other banks, but I know that all the financial institutions are looking into starting it in the next few months, let's say. Okay. Okay, so going back to the slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talk about budgeting, and then next slide, Jim. So here is a sample budgeting spreadsheet that I've personally put together for you. So I'm hoping that some of these expenses items would be relevant. And this is simply an Excel spreadsheet I put together for some that, like feel free to copy this, take a picture of this, and modify however you see fit, right? But essentially, like you can see that from top to bottom, it's important to know how much income you're getting, right? Your employment income, you have bonuses, if you have other sources of income, how much you're getting a month after tax, right? It's good to know your after tax dollars. And then moving on to your expenses, then you want to know where your money is going, on a monthly basis. If you have a mortgage, or are you paying rent? And for those homeowners out there, or for the ones that are looking to buy a house, right? Buying a house is of course is good, but then when you own a house, there's a lot of other expenses that come along with the house, right? So for example, there's property tax, home insurance, maintenance, improvements, and so on, right? Homeowners association fee, that one I didn't even list it on there. But a lot of other hidden expenses, if you will. So make sure you have a budget and think about these items before you make your big ticket purchases. And as you go down this, you'll see that if you have a line of credit payment, if you have any student loans, credit card payments, your vehicle expenses, groceries, and here you see that I break it down to getting your groceries versus ordering in takeouts, and versus you go dine out with a friend, right? And then the bottom of that is personal expenses, whether you have a gym membership, or your Netflix or Disney streaming, and if you're saving towards any special purposes, for birthdays, for vacations or whatnot, and if you have the extra dollars to save towards your retirement or towards your home purchase. So from here, you can see that what your monthly income is, minus your monthly expenses. And then at the very bottom line, you see the net cash flow, right? Hopefully we're on the positive. And let's say if there's a surplus, then you can look into how to allocate this into your savings. But let's say if you're a deficit, that's okay, right? Then here at least you can work on eliminating some of those expenses possibly, right? Or better yet, look for other income sources. Next slide, please. Okay, so here essentially it's the same slide, but then I'm applying the 50-30-20 rule in there. So here you can see that the first 50%, that's all the way up to groceries. These are the essentials, right? And then the next 30%, you're starting from you're ordering your takeout, getting your skip the dishes, all the way to your TV streaming. I mean that is more discretionary, right? And your 20% is your saving. So here it will be a good general guideline for you out there that doesn't have a budget or want to get some idea to modify your spreadsheet. So yeah, feel free to use this. And let's say if you do want the actual Excel spreadsheet that I created, feel free to reach out later on, and I'm happy to send you a copy of that. Next slide, please, Jeff. Okay, so here we talk about a lot of people might be wondering, especially if you're fresh graduating, or even then, even right now, myself, right? I've been working for a dozen years now. Of course, I bought my house, but I have a mortgage, and then I always ask myself, if I have an extra dollar, let's say from my monthly savings or from my bonuses, should I be investing or should I be paying down my mortgage? Or let's say in some of your cases, should I be paying down my student loans or my credit cards, or versus investing? And I think the key to understanding that is understand how much it's costing you. Right? So credit card debts, as we all know, that credit card interest rates are expensive, right? So it range from anywhere generally about 20 to 30%. And remember, credit card interest, the way they compound is different from your other expenses. So credit card compounds daily. So meaning that, so for the calculation, let's say you owe $1,000 on the credit card, and it's, let's say on 20% interest. Maybe every day it works out to be let's just say $1 in interest. So the next day, instead of using 1,000, you apply 20%, it becomes 1,001, and then apply the 20%. And then the next day will be let's say 1,002, and then apply the 20%, right? So that way that's why that credit card debt is something that you want to manage, because otherwise it's like a snowball, right? It's just rolling bigger and bigger. Yeah, and so understanding your costs will be very important. And then the average car loan these days is roughly just under 8%. The Canada prime rate is about 6.7% today, and that is your Alberta student loan rate, right? And another idea for you is use the avalanche method. So what does that mean? The avalanche method is pay down the debt with the highest interest rate first, right? So for those of you that have multiple debts, let's say credit cards, student loans, car loans, or whatnot, list them out, see what are the ones that are costing you the most. In this case, likely the credit card. Then you might want to tackle the credit card first, and then maybe tackle the car loan or tackle the student loan, right? And let's say that if you have your debt under control, and you want to see, okay, what's the next step, right? The next step is, before you actually look into investing, we actually would suggest you to set up an emergency fund. So some of you may have heard of this term. It's also called a rainy day funds. Basically, it's the what ifs, right? So what if my car breaks down? What if all of a sudden my family needs money, right? Or what if all of a sudden I need money for something else, right? So you want to have a pool of funds, ideally in your savings, that you can draw the money from. And generally, as a financial advice, we suggest to keep 3 to 6 months of expenses. So why this range? Because let's say if you're single, you're starting your career, you have limited expenses or you have limited obligations, then maybe keeping 2 or 3 months in your savings account is enough of your expenses. But let's say as you move on in life and in your career, maybe now that you have a spouse, you're getting married, you're buying your first home, or you have a car payment, and now that you have more responsibility and obligations. In this scenario, you might actually want to keep more of your monthly expenses. So we might suggest you look in 5 or 6 months of your expenses. So let's say your monthly expenses is $2,000 a month. 3 months of that is $6,000. 6 months is $12,000. Right. So keep some money in your savings account to cover the what ifs. And once you have your debt under control, you're paying towards your debt, you have your emergency fund set up, then you take a picture of your cash flow, look at it, and then think about whether you should invest or not. And it's important to understand the opportunity cost, right? This term, essentially what it means is how much does it cost me if I were to not do it, basically, right? So let's say if you have $5,000 in your bank account just sitting around there, you have your rainy day funds covered, but you just want to have the money sitting there in a savings account just so you can see the money, right? Then that might only be paying you 0.5% interest, because we all know that interest rates are not that much these days for your bank savings. But let's say you have a car loan that's paying that you are paying 8% out of pocket. So your opportunity cost is actually almost close to 8%, because yes, it is nice to have the money in your savings, but if you're not using it, you might as well use it to pay down the debt that you're paying your interest rate for. So that way, that as soon as you're paying it down, you're getting ahead of the game, right? So that's how we advise clients to justify investing or paying down debt, right? Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, and in today's environment, as we all know, that inflation is high. A lot of things have gotten a lot more expensive. Like groceries or gas pump, and a lot of other things. So things are getting more expensive. So a lot of you might be wondering, okay, so what action should I be taking now that interest rates have gone up, right? Next slide, please. So the idea of it, I would say, is the same principle that applies to whether it's a high interest rate environment or a lower interest rate environment. Is first and foremost, have a budget. Have a budget, have a plan in place, know where you're at. And once you know where you're at, let's say if it's a high interest rate environment, now that you know that your borrowing cost is higher, then you might want to tackle some of that debt first before investing. And if there's any big purchases, any big ticket items that can wait, whether it's a home purchase or let's say, whether it's let's call a home appliance items, any big purchase that can wait, you might want to wait for it, right? To always keep the same principle of paying down your debt, paying yourself, and then keep saving. Like this principle will always serve you, regardless of the economy cycle we're in. Next slide, please, Jim. Okay, and now this is a slide that's a little bit of a busy slide, but it's essentially another method that some of you may want to apply for paying down your debt. We talked about avalanche method. Basically, list out your debt and pay the ones with high interest rate first. So that makes a lot of sense financially, right? But then for some of you, you might want to look into this method. It's called a debt snowball. So what it is that, let's say you have multiple debt. Let's say you have a credit card, a student loan, a car loan, and so on, and maybe list all those items out. And whatever is a smaller amount, tackle that one first, because once you get the smaller amount paid off, then all of a sudden that is out of your mind, out of sight, and then you don't have to be paying that anymore, right? Even though that's a lower interest rate one, but then that one is gone, right? So it's like psychologically speaking, it makes you feel better, right? Because one of the debt is already gone, and then you go on to tackle the second smallest one, and then third smallest one, and that's how you pay down your debt. So if you ask me, should I be using the avalanche method or versus the snowball method? Truly, it's really up to you, right? So the avalanche method makes the most sense financially, versus the snowball method makes the most sense psychologically, right? It really depends. But either way, as long as you're paying down your debt, you're ahead of the game, right? Because you're paying yourself. You're not paying to the bank. You're not paying to the credit card company. You're paying yourself, right? So you either way, either method you adopt, you're ahead of the game. Next slide, please, Jim. Okay, so now we're moving on to section 2. I've talked a lot about different types of accounts and different types of financial planning subjects and budgeting. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat before I hand it off to Mandeep. And so bear with me here, please. So there is a question about how TFSA room start accumulating. So that one we can actually take it offline, because that one is not applicable to everybody here. For the person that asked the question, thank you. Feel free to message Mandeep and I, and we're happy to look into the TFSA calculation of when the room actually start to accumulate, after becoming a permanent resident. And okay, there's another question about halal finances. So a lot of bank, because of backgrounds for religious reasons, for those that doesn't want to start accumulating interest, then we have some of those clients too. We get asked those questions, and then if capital gains are okay, then you can look into some of the options. Let's say instead of putting in the savings account and collecting interest, then you can invest into ETFs, mutual funds, or stocks, to grow your money, so that your money is based on capital gains, not on the interest you receive. So hopefully that answers your question. And one more question here is, how do I recommend budgeting as a student when you might not have any income, or your income does not cover all essential costs? I mean, that's a great question, right? That's a struggle that a lot of students are going through. That's a struggle that I went through myself, right? We all remember those days. I would say that if you don't have sufficient income to cover your essential costs, then look into it's a tricky situation, right? Because essentially there's only so many things you can do. Once you list out your expenses, having a budget is important, right? Because that way that will at least help you visualize what are some of the expenses you have, and try to identify if there's any costs you could cut down, right? I know you mentioned the essential cost, so the room to trim is minimal, right? So but if there's any area that, whether it's, I know it may not sound realistic here, but let's say if there's a cheaper rent option, right? Or let's say if a cheaper grocery provider, right? That's one option, cutting down the expenses. And on the other hand is, if there are ways you can increase your income, right? Of course, finding a job would be one. Finding a better paying job would be one. And if there's any way that you can generate other sources of income, so that way that essentially it's the same concept applying to budgeting, that is either we increase the income or we try to lower our expenses. Unfortunately, that's not a whole lot of ways around it, and I know that's not the perfect answer. I do apologize, but if you do want to have a chat later on, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to look more into that for you. So I know I've covered a lot, I've talked a lot too. So let me hand it off to Mandeep, and he's going to take you through investing. So please take the floor, Mandeep.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I hope you can hear me okay and see me okay. If there's any issues, Kevin and Jennifer, let me know. So yeah, Kevin, you shared a lot of meaningful information, and I'll try continuing that. And hey, everyone, some of you might be wondering, where is this other presenter hiding? So I'll be covering this section 2 of the presentation, and the topics you see on the screen is what I plan to cover in a bit more detail. First of all, good for you, Kevin, there were some hiccups and you took on where you left, and like nothing happened. So good on that. And Jennifer, thank you for making everything work. I guess universe doesn't like the financial planning topic too much. And I can see some dark clouds outside, so my fingers are crossed. Hopefully we'll be okay. And thanks to all the panelists for sticking around. As Kevin mentioned in the presentation, each of you will come across this information and concepts in your investing and personal finance journey, and it's so applicable to every one of you. I know it's late in the evening. Be there with me, and it'll be a good time investment from your end. I can promise that. Before we dive into it, huge congratulations to all the new graduates. You should be very proud of yourselves, and I have no doubt each of you will be successful in your respective careers. So huge congratulations to all of you. Okay, so some of the topics I want to cover now. Kevin talked about the types of accounts, TFSA, RSPs, first home savings accounts. I want to dive into a little bit on the type of investments you can hold in those accounts, stocks, bonds, ETFs, etc. And I'll cover some other topics as well. So Jennifer, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, awesome. So when we start our investing journey, or if we are actively investing, two most popular asset classes are stocks and bonds, right? So as I said, account types, Kevin covered quite a bit in detail. These are the how you want to fill that bucket. Your account is a bucket. Now stocks, bonds, other investment types are how you want to fill that bucket and invest your money. Okay, so I want to explain what does a stock mean and what does a bond mean, right? So stocks, think about it as ownership in a piece of business. You're buying a share of individual company, you're owning a piece of business, and you're trying, and what you're looking to achieve is participate in the growth of that business over time, as opposed to bonds, which are you're lending money. So a lot of times government and corporations, they will raise money for their projects, and bonds are loans or money lended to the government or corporation, and it's a promise to pay you back in interest. So a bit different in the way they operate. So stocks is ownership, bonds, it's like you're lending money or getting interest for that money. So when you think about stocks, right, typically when you compare both those two asset classes, stocks have higher risk compared to bonds would. Now, I personally don't like using the word risk because in my opinion, if you're investing money and you don't need access to that money for, let's say, 7, 10 plus years, if you're not investing in stocks, that's actually a high risk because you're giving up a lot of potential return. So I would use the word volatility, where if you're owning stocks, if you're investing in stocks, you would experience a higher volatility compared to you would in bonds. And I'll cover that a little more in the next slides as well. But high risk, the risk is that how they both compare, it's different. So it's a risk and reward relationship, right? So if you're taking on a little bit higher risk with stocks, you should be rewarded with a high return. So typically, if you see historically, stocks do give you a high return compared to bonds would, as long as it's a good portfolio of a good investment of stocks you're holding. And with stocks, you have the opportunity to profit from the growth of that stock and also dividends. So example would be the big 5 banks in Canada, right? They're known for paying dividends to investors. So there's two ways you can make money when you're holding stocks. And bonds, it's a company or a government, they're agreeing to pay you interest over time. And you can make money on the value of bonds itself. They change as well. I won't go into too much detail about that, but that's how basically stocks and bonds compare. So we can go to the next slide. Awesome. So here, this graph sums it up really well, what we were talking about. So here you would see 3 line graphs. One is for stocks, the one on the left, one for bonds, and one for cash or savings. Cash or savings, something that has a guaranteed return. So for each line graph, you would see 3 dots. The green dot is the highest return in a given year. Blue is the average return. The red dot is the lowest in a given year. So now for stocks, the data is for S&P 500, which is the top 500 companies in US by the market share. And the data runs from all the way from 1928 to 2022. So almost 100 years of data we're looking at here. And same for bonds as well, and cash going all the way to 1928 and comparing. So when you look at stocks, you would see the green dot, 52.6%. That's the highest return that a portfolio of stocks, those US stocks, would have given you in one of the best years in the last 100 years. But you can see the red dot for stocks, that's negative 43%, right? So it shows you the range is quite big. You can have an excellent year or a bad year in the market. Your values was cut in almost half. But if you look at the average for stocks, the blue dot, that's 9.6%. That's a quite healthy return, 9.6% on an average year over year. That's a pretty good return. When you compare it with bonds, you would see the range now is a little bit smaller. It's more narrow compared to stocks. The best year bonds saw would have been around 30+%. The worst is 17-point-some% versus 43. So that's where we were talking about risk and return, right? So the risk is a little lower compared to stocks. But if you look at the average return for bonds, it's 4.6%. So because you're taking on less risk, less volatility as an investor, you're rewarded with return that is less than stocks. And when we come to cash, the last category, the highest return you're seeing at around 14%. In my opinion, I guess those days are gone when we are going to see 14% return in cash or a guaranteed savings. I don't see that happening again. The average you would see the blue dot is around 3.3%, right? And the red dot, which is 0, which means, well, you won't lose any money in a particular year if you're owning cash. It's just that you might not gain any interest at all. So I hope that gives you an idea of how the returns and risk for each category compares. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, awesome. So I want to talk a little more about, mutual funds and ETFs. So what is a mutual fund? What's an ETF? What they do is mutual funds and ETFs, it's an investment type of investments where a pool of money from many investors are used to buy investments. So a mutual fund or an ETF can hold a different variety of investments. For example, stocks we looked at, bonds, commodities like gold or Bitcoin is a famous one now, right? So a mutual fund or an ETF can hold all these different investment types in one fund. And what's the benefit? You're getting diversification, right? For example, if you within a same fund, you can have stocks from different sectors, from different countries. You can have Canadian stocks, US, international, outside US and Canada. You can have some stocks from financial industry, from healthcare, technology, different sectors, and then you can hold some bonds and say some Bitcoin or commodities. So that gives you diversification. That's the benefit. And you can start with as low as $25 a month, right? So it gives you easier access to be able to invest in the markets. So that's a similarity between mutual funds and ETFs. Some of the differences is mutual funds. So it's bought and sold once per day. What I mean by that is within a day, let's say it has a fixed unit price. Let's say mutual fund has a price of $20, right? So if you buy it in the morning or the afternoon or late in the morning, you're getting the same price. As opposed to ETF, that can be actively bought and sold throughout the day, and the price can change throughout the day. So in the morning, price could be X amount of dollars. In 1 hour, there was some change in the market, so you'll buy ETF at a different price throughout the day. So mutual funds, fixed price for a particular day. ETFs can change, the price can change throughout. The big difference between mutual funds and ETFs is mutual funds are actively managed. So it's actively managed by a portfolio managers, and there are changes that can happen within the fund, right, based on what the opportunity a portfolio manager is seeing, or if there are some risks based on that, they can take an active call and make changes. ETFs, it's just passively managed. So as I took an example, if you look at US stocks, S&P 500 is an index which follows top 500 companies in US. If you buy an ETF for that, US stocks, it's just going to passively follow that. No active changes are happening. And ETFs have gained a lot of popularity over the years because they're generally lower in fees compared to mutual funds. So those are some of the differences, similarities, and I hope when you come across these words, you'll have a better understanding of what they actually mean. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so here I want to talk about two concepts: dollar cost averaging and a lump sum investing. So we can go to the next slide, Jennifer. Thank you. So lump sum investing, it's an act of investing all your available money at once. The amount of money you're investing, that's not important. Only that the entire amount of money that's available to you, you're investing right away. So for example, in the first graph, you would see if you have $12,000 available, you decide to invest all of it today. That's what I would call a lump sum investing. And a dollar cost average it's an act of investing all of your available money over time. So again, how you decide to invest those funds over time is really up to you. However, the typical approach is equal size payments over a specific time period. So if you see an example here, if you're investing You had $12,000, you decide to invest $1,000 a month over 12 months. That's dollar cost average. Now, please know that regular contributions to your investment plan through work and ongoing savings is the best way to invest and save for future, right? So I would consider that a lump sum, because if you're working and at a particular time, at a moment of time, that was all the available money you had. And if you decided to invest, then that's, in a way, that's lump sum investing as well. So the reason I'm discussing this topic is there may come a time in your life when you find yourself receiving a large sum of money, right? Maybe you get a year-end bonus through your work, you sell a property, or you sell a car or something, some other asset, or if you win a lottery, right? I guess that's possible for some of us as well. And now you have cash available to invest. So the question comes, well, how should I put that money to work? Should I invest all of it now, or should I do it over regular installments, which is called dollar cost averaging? So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so if you see here, that's some of the pros and cons of each. But when you see DCA is dollar cost average. That's just an acronym for dollar cost average and lump sum. So some of the advantage or disadvantage. So as we discussed, in dollar cost averaging, you're putting the same amount of money over time. So let's say you put some money in the beginning of the year and there was a huge market decline. Well, your drop won't be as severe because you invested only a portion of your money, right? And the most important advantage of dollar cost average for me personally is it forms good investing habits, right? So if you're doing that over time, it's forming good investing and saving habits, and it gets you into that routine of regular savings. It gets you into that habit of regular savings. And if you're more conservative as an investor, you might like this strategy more because you're not investing all of your money at once. Some of the disadvantage is you can miss out on gains if the market continues to go up. Now, most times markets do go down, but most times markets are going up in value. So if you decide to wait and put your money to work over intervals, then you might miss out on some gains. And I'll discuss more in the next slide, but research shows that dollar cost averaging, it underperforms lump sum investing over a long period of time. So the advantages for lump sum investing is you're taking advantage of gains right away as long as the market continues to climb and go up. And it's a good option for those who have a lot of money available and have a large time horizon and can go through some volatility. You're okay to take some risk for long-term growth. Some of the disadvantage, if you're really unlucky, would be if you just invested all of your money and the market's declined, it could take some time before you recover the full amount, right? And then depending upon your risk tolerance, seeing a big drop, it can be a little nerve-wracking if you're conservative in nature. So that's how these two concepts compare. And if you go to the next slide, I can discuss a little more about how they compare on performance. So if you see here, you will see the line graph, and you would see one straight horizontal line at 0%. So what's happening here is it's data all the way to 1960 till 2020, and it's for US stocks. I guess US is a lot more popular than Canada and other countries when it comes to stock markets. So a lot of data is for US. So if you see here, it's comparing dollar cost averaging and lump sum. What would do better for you? So that 0% line, horizontal line where you see, so the graph is above 0% in those years. That means if you used dollar cost averaging, you actually outperformed versus someone who invested all the money right away. And when that graph is below 0%, in those times, if you invested all your money right away using a lump sum strategy, you would actually outperform. You would do better than someone who was using dollar cost average. The example here is for dollar cost average, the time period taken is 24 months. So let's say if you had $24,000, $1,000 a month for 24 months. That's what the example is taken here for dollar cost averaging. So if you see here, most of the time, almost 75% of the time in this graph, you would see it's below 0%. That means 75% of the times, lump sum, if you invested all the money available right away, you actually, your overall return was better compared to doing it for 24 months over 2 years. So you did better with lump sum. There are some periods which dollar cost averaging did better, and those are actually the periods when there was a huge market decline. You would see a spike in just above 2000, year 2000 and 2008. Those were the years when markets did go down in value. So if you did not put all the money right away, you were ahead. But overall, the conclusion would be dollar cost averaging will underperform lump sum investing for most asset classes most of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So here I just want to talk about what's good for you. Ultimately, personal circumstances, right? That's the most important determinant of whether you go, if you have a lot of money available, if you invest it right away, or you invest it over time. And you want to ask yourself how long you need before you start drawing money out of the account. If it's more than 20 years, you might want to get cash invested and working for you right away because you have a lot of time before you need it. But if you have a shorter time period of, let's say, 5 years or less, then probably dollar cost averaging might be better for you. And as we saw, as per the research, looks like lump sum investing does better for you long term. But again, depends. A lot of answers in personal finances depends upon your personal situation and upon your circumstances. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, go big early if you can. So this section, I'm quite excited about this section. So what I'm trying to talk about in this section is the importance of starting your investment journey early versus waiting longer. And it's so applicable to each of you because a lot of you are graduating now, earlier in your career. So if you were to start early versus wait longer to start your investing journey, what's better and how much would it hurt if you wait too long? So that's some of the data I'll try to cover in this section. That'll help you understand the impact it has on your future finances. So, and I totally get that, right? Saving a lot of money early in your career, it's not easy, especially if you have lower income and you're looking for a job. It's not realistic, right? Our income usually increases over time with experience. However, if you're able to find a way to save during the first, let's say, 10 years of your career, once you have a job, once you start working, it'll pay off in big ways, right? So when I say start early, it does not mean right away. As soon as you can is the right way to go. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, so this graph, let's imagine there are two people who decide to follow different saving strategies, right? One commits to saving for the first 10 years. That individual is the start early person, the start early you see on the graph. So that individual has decided to stay for the first 10 years of their career and then just stop. They're never saving again, right? While the other individual decides, I'm going to wait for 10 years before I start investing, but then I'll save for 30 years. So we're taking a time horizon of overall 40 years. So the start late individual starting 10 years later, not doing much for the first 10 years, actually not doing anything, and then investing for the next 30 years. So what we're trying to see is assuming that they both save $10,000 a year while they're saving. So for the start early individual, for the first 10 years, $10,000 a year, and the start late individual, $10,000 a year for 30 years, but starting at year 10. Right, you want to see who ends up with more wealth over 40 years. And if you can see here from the graph, the start early individual is ahead. So the amount of money start early individual did put in was $10,000. Oh, sorry, $10,000 a year. That's $100,000 in total. And the start late individual invested in total $300,000. So that's $10,000 for 30 years, right? So 3 times the money, but still start early individual is quite ahead. And it's fascinating, right? I understand as as a finance professional, I understand the power of compounding when your money is growing for you. Now, one assumption, maybe I forgot to tell you, is the return we are assuming is 7% for this scenario. So we are assuming you're able to achieve a 7% return in both the cases, right? So you will see the increase in the start early portfolio after year 10, it's completely due to compounding and there's no additional savings. So that's the power of compounding for you, is if you can start early, it's going to pay off in big ways for you. Okay, so if you can go to the next slide. This again, similar idea. I want to get the message across is why delaying your savings hurts you financially, right? So in this graph, let's assume someone like this one person who's investing $10,000 a year for 40 years while earning the same 7% return each year, right? So the end of 40 years, so the amount of if the person is investing $10,000 a year for 40 years, the amount of money invested total is 400,000, right? That's the amount of money total invested, and the overall value of the portfolio will actually be close to $2 million. That's so all the excess growth, it just came from investment growth, all the excess value over the contributions, right? So what's happening here is each bar graph, it shows you the value of $10,000 by the end of 40 years. So the first $10,000 you contributed eventually grew a lot bigger compared to the last 10,000, just because of the time, the amount of time that money had to just do its work and compound over time. Even though each bar graph is $10,000 a year invested, but the amount of money they end up being, the part of portfolio they end up being, you will see the first 10,000 ends up contributing a lot more to the final portfolio. So that's where the power of time, which is on your side, the most of your side. So this is an important concept if you can take that away with you. If you can go to the next slide. Okay, so it's all good. It's amazing. We saw the effectiveness of this strategy, and that's the reason, because it's so effective, that I want to get across some precautions for the strategy as well, right? So it's easier to take your early savings too far, given how good it is, right? You might risk finding this too stressful and missing out opportunities, trying to really pursue it and really trying to get those savings up in the early years. You don't want to miss out on other things just because you want to do that. So the advice would be balance enjoyment today with delayed gratification for the future, right? Try to create that balance where you're living for today and saving some money for future as well, because the more time you can have, the better for you. So find what works for you. Don't feel guilty about spending money on stuff that matters, and that's what I do, right? For me, experience and memories they mean a lot more to me than just possessions. So if it's experiencing something new, if it's travel, I don't feel guilty about spending that money, and I can be selectively cheap on some other areas where it's easy for me to cut down. So find what works for you. But one thing if you can just reasonably, whatever you can save, if you can early on, it's going to pay off in big ways for you. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, awesome. So now one question me and Kevin, and a lot of questions we get asked, and you probably ask yourself as well, should I just invest myself, or do I need a financial advisor or a planner? Now, when I say financial advisor, I would be honest, the industry hasn't done a good job because there's a lot of different job profiles that can be called a financial advisor, right? It could be you're dealing with someone who's a personal banker in one of the banks, or they could be in a role of more sales of a product, and there are some who are actually in the profession of advice or planning. So it could be all of us could be called by a similar name. So I know it gets confusing, but should you be doing it yourself, or should you use an advisor? Hopefully I'll try to answer that. So there's three kinds of investors overall, right? One, those who need help, they get it. They know that they either don't have the time or the knowledge or the understanding or no motivation to do it themselves, and they think they'll be better off someone helping them, they get the help. Second is those who can handle everything on their own, right? And they're totally fine doing it. There's so many resources available now online. There's a lot of platforms available for yourself to be able to do it yourself as well. So if you can really educate yourself, you can handle your finances on your own as well. And then there's a third category, which those who need help, but they convince themselves that probably they don't, right? So then that's a tricky one where you think you can, but maybe you'll be better off working with someone. So if we can go to the next slide, Jennifer, thank you. So when should I use an advisor or a planner, and when can they add value, right? So this is an incomplete list, just some of the things that came to my mind. It's not a complete list, but some areas where, let's say, if your financial life is complex, probably it's not that complex early in your careers. You're starting your careers and it's more simpler, right? So when your financial life is complex, that probably is a good time to talk to someone, like if you're and they can add value to your overall financial picture, right? If you're a business owner, or you have some rental properties, business owner with corporation, it gets complicated, help can add value. Second, when you make a big mistake, right? So in investing, there's a saying that past returns are not the indication of future returns. But in my opinion, past behavior is a pretty good indicator of your future behavior, right? We can learn from our mistakes, but we are pretty much who we are. So let's say in 2020, for example, when COVID became a reality, markets dropped a lot, right? And if you're someone who panicked, sold the investments, even though you didn't need access to them for a while, that's one of the mistakes. And if you panicked last time, and if you see yourself in future when you're investing, and if you become emotional when the markets are not going your way and you panic, but you convince yourself next time I'm going to be okay, you're probably not being 100% honest with yourself. So that is one. If that happens to you, that's an area where someone can help you avoid that mistake. When you have a life event, right? So let's say if you have a baby, you change a job, you inherit some money. If you have a huge bonus, that's some change in your life. And you're not feeling too confident of how to approach it financially. That's the time when talking to an advisor or a planner can help you. When you don't have the time for it, right? If you don't have the time, if you'd rather focus on other things that bring you more joy and you're more interested in, if you don't have the time, you're too busy, well, then good chance you're going to neglect your finances. So if you don't have the time, talking to someone, getting help will pay off, right? If you're tired of doing it yourself, so if you just don't have the motivation of doing it yourself, you're tired of it, you're probably going to neglect that. Another case, talking to someone, getting help pays off. And when you want to get specific about your goals, so if you want to buy a house in 5 years, or if you have a house, you want to buy a second house in 10 years, and you want to retire in 15 years, the specific goals, if you really want to drill down to it, then an advisor can help you with some planning on how to achieve that objective and if that's possible or not. So that's one more example. And if you just feel the need to talk to someone about money, right? It could be anything. And if you feel like you need to talk to someone about money, a pretty good indication that talking to an advisor or planner will be helpful for you. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so importance of financial planning, right? And so you all must have heard this phrase, money cannot buy you happiness. Well, I kind of believe in that too. Money alone cannot buy you happiness. There's a lot of other things that go into it. For example, your relationships, your physical health, mental health, a lot of things that have to go right in you for you to be happy. But the inverse is also true. If you're worried about money or your finances, it's tough to be happy or in peace, right? So the money it does. So if you see, there was a survey done in 2022 by FP Canada, and 2 in 5 Canadians, they say money is their number one source of stress. That's right up there, right? And then you'll see some other areas as well, like personal health, work, relationship, but money is right up there, right? So what financial planning can do is it won't take away all the money problems, but it's definitely gonna help you because you'll feel more in control. If you have a plan in place, you'll feel more in control, and that stress does go down because of that. You can go to the next slide. So this is some areas, right? How with a part of survey, how a financial plan can help you. Now you will see some numbers here with the stress levels reduced when you're working with a planner or without a planner. I would say not necessarily with a planner or without, but if you have a plan in place or not, right? But if you're working with someone, there's a lot better chance that you'll have a plan in place. You'll be doing the right thing. If you're working with an advisor or a coach, then you're more likely to stick with it. So some of the examples of why having a financial plan can help, right? If you're trying to get down that debt, if you're feeling financially worried because of some other reason, having a plan does play a big role. We can go to the next slide, Jennifer. Okay, so far I was talking about the importance of financial plan. Now, like, what is? You might be wondering, okay, I'm kind of understand, but what is a financial plan, and how particular I need to be with a financial plan if I want to get one. So a financial plan, it does not have to be a 20-page document with complicated graphs, data, and spreadsheet, right? It could be a simple 1-page plan. And if you see here, for a plan, you need to know where you are today. What's the situation today, right? How much is your income, your savings, what kind of debts or loans you have, where do you want to go? So you need to have a destination in mind as well. Good understanding of where you are. This is my objective, where I want to be, in how much time. So when you see that how to get there, that's the process, right? And so you first setting a goal, and you need to know where you want to go. Once you have the starting point and the destination, what you need to focus on is the process. As I said, how to get there. The result is going to take care of yourself. You don't want to get too obsessed with the goal itself, right? So how do you get there? And that really is, in a way, a simple financial plan because you need to have a good understanding of where you are. You need to have an understanding of where you want to go. And then you need to have an understanding of how do I get there, right? If you have a goal in mind without a plan, it's simply a dream, one that you might achieve or not. So this is what I would say. If you want to take a picture of this sketch, do that, but this is more of on a basic level on what was the understanding you should have, right? So you want to, all the things that Kevin shared with you, right? Track your money with the use of budgeting. Try to follow the 50-30-20 rule, as Kevin discussed. Or if you cannot follow the 50-30-20 rule, just save anything you can. Have an emergency fund, right? So important. Your vehicle, your car breaks down one day, it's not cheap. Where do you come up with the money? So have some emergency fund always in place. Take care of your high interest debt. Invest to achieve your longer term goals. If it's you're saving for a down payment or some other goal, save some money overall going on a regular basis. Take advantage of accounts like tax-free savings accounts, first home savings accounts, RRSP, whatever is a good fit for your needs, right? So I know we're discussing a lot with you, but if you're doing some of those things, that's a part of your plan there already. We can go to the next slide. Jennifer? Okay, so I do want to wrap up with just do something, right? And I would say it's not necessarily about having a financial plan, it's about planning for your financial future. So will you know exactly how much how much to save for a down payment? Or would you know how much I should save in general? Probably not, right? Save as much as you can. Take some action, right? If you cannot decide whether should I pay down my debt or should I invest, if you really have that confusion, maybe just pay down the debt. A lot of people I know, when they pay down their debt, they feel good, right? So if you just cannot decide, pay down debt, do something. If you cannot decide where to invest, how to invest, just invest in some index fund for US and Canada. I'm assuming if you don't need the money for a long period of time. So what you invest in, it should be right for you, but just invest in something simple and leave it there, right? So the message really is just do something, just take some action, and any step you take, you're going forward towards that objective that you have in mind, because that it could be a long journey. Focus on one step at a time. So yeah, that's my message. Just do something. We can go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So that's the end of my section as well. I'll keep an eye on the questions that have come in. That's my email for Kevin and myself if anybody wants to get in touch. Okay, if we'll be sharing the slides. I guess, Jennifer, you can confirm, but I believe it will be posted. And okay, there was just a response from Kevin on something. So let me know if I'm missing a question. I don't see.
Yeah, no, actually, that's great, Mandeep. So I was just literally asking Kevin whether you guys were okay sharing the slides, because that's not something I asked before. So I didn't want to put you on the spot, but Kevin says it is. So hopefully it is with you too. So when I send out the survey email, that's also where you get your PD credit and hear about the micro credentials and fill out our survey. I'll also include the presentation there as well. I'll also include Kevin and Mandeep's emails, so you can email them directly. And I'll just give a couple seconds here for people to type in maybe some questions you have about any of the presentation. Kevin or Mandeep's will just give a couple seconds here for people to type in questions if they have any. I'll just give a couple seconds because I'm a pretty slow typer, so I don't want to put people on the spot here to type anything in. But I know Kevin did answer a lot of questions there around the more TFSA and whatnot. And I see that Kevin's talking to some people about more of the in-depth questions that they had. And like I said, the email is probably the best place for that. I really appreciate, Mandeep, though, your viewpoint about balancing life with money. You focused on that a lot, and I think that is an important topic to balance off being really smart about these kinds of things and starting early and small, but at the same time, just, you know, other things are important too in life. So I think that we are not going, oh, thank you. Can we get the recording for the session? So, well, I'm having an inner debate about that because I've been chatting with Kevin here as this has been going. I've done about 100 webinars. I've never had one go as glitchy with the PowerPoint or quitting or the sounds of the mics. I'll see if I can edit it up. My original intention was to post it up on the on-demand page tomorrow. I'll see whether I can edit it to a place that Mandeep and Kevin also feel happy with it. But yeah, that would probably be beneficial. But if nothing else, then the slide deck. Kevin, I'm not able to respond to you individually. I'm sure. Okay, so I'm reading out a response because the participants aren't able to go in the chat, only in the Q&A right now, Kevin. So Elizabeth saw your response and she's responding back there. So I'm not sure if there's anything else, but I will send out those emails in the presentation for sure. It sounds like Kevin and and then Deep are definitely open to having discussions with you. So I'd make use of that, seeing as they're both, this is what they do. So I think we'll probably wind it up, if that's okay. So I would like to thank Kevin and Mandeep for sharing your expertise with us today, and for all of you being so patient with some of our technical difficulties. Really appreciate you sticking around. We only lost a couple people there. We encourage you all to stay connected to the U of A. There are many opportunities to get involved and be a part of this community. So follow us on social media to find out more, and consider joining some other Life After University sessions this week. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and have a great evening. Good night.